she's suing investigators and other people involved in prosecuting her, and she wants money from them. This is a case where the first one was a hung jury, and the second one was an acquittal. It's those cases are so hard to win. I have no problem telling you, I have criminal clients, criminal defendants who say, when this is over, I want to sue them. And I say, I got a better shot of growing hair before you getting a civil case and winning it, because it's just not the way our system is set up regarding criminal cases. There are some ramifications. If you get sued civilly and the judge determines the suit was absolutely frivolous, the judge can say, you know what, you're going to pay their legal fees. But that very rarely happens in the criminal justice system. But she's like, hey, I was acquitted, and therefore you all must pay. And as you both know, those cases are rarely successful.
Well,
what do you think, Phil?
Yeah, so this because when there's an indictment, even if there's an acquittal, when there is an indictment, that there's a judicial finding, even if it's by a grand jury, we consider that a judicial finding of probable cause, which means a crime probably was committed and the defendant is the one that probably committed it. And so that acts as a legal type of insulation from the people who pressed the claim against the defendant. It doesn't absolve anybody from any liability if they perjure themselves or anything like that. But as Arthur was saying, that's a really, really, really hard thing to prove. And remember, when we're talking about this civil lawsuit brought by Reed, she doesn't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. She has to, or excuse me, the decedent's estate doesn't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove that Karen Reed was responsible wrongly for that death by what's called a preponderance of the evidence. It's the civil standard. It's much, much lower than the proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So not only do the plaintiffs here have a better shot, I think, of winning this case than maybe the prosecution did on the strength of the evidence because the burden of proof was slower, these counterclaims, these multitude of counterclaims that Reed wants to bring, they border on, if they are not actually frivolous, she has zero chance of prevailing, I think, on these counterclaims, and she may have a lot to lose on the merits of the wrongful death itself. And once she sues all these people, you also might create what's called something called incomplete diversity. In other words, you may have people from other states involved, okay? And so if that's the case, this might give rise to it being removed into federal court where you've got different types of jurors than maybe you had in the state trial the first time around. I think she may need to think twice before she brings such a bizarre type counterclaim situation.